$1 million is a lot of money to lose on a guess. But that night, the billionaire CEO was about to discover that his biggest mistake was not the bet. It was believing he already knew the answer. The Grand Harbor restaurant in downtown Chicago was filled with the sound of elegant conversations, crystal glasses, and the quiet confidence of people who were used to being successful. It was the kind of place where executives signed major agreements, investors discussed future opportunities, and every person in the room seemed to have a story of achievement. At the center of the evening was Alexander Bennett, the 45-year-old founder and CEO of Bennett Financial Technologies. Known for building a billion-dollar company from the ground up, Alexander had earned a reputation for making difficult decisions and recognizing opportunities before anyone else. He believed numbers told the truth. He believed intelligence could be measured. And after years of leading one of the most successful technology companies in the country, he believed he had become very good at understanding people. That evening, Alexander was hosting a private dinner with investors and business partners. The conversation moved between technology, finance, and the future of global markets. Everyone at the table listened carefully as Alexander explained how successful businesses were built through logic, preparation, and the ability to solve complex problems. The difference between ordinary thinking and exceptional thinking, he said confidently, is the ability to see patterns that others miss. Several guests agreed. They admired his confidence because his results were impossible to ignore. But standing quietly nearby was someone almost nobody noticed. Maya Robinson was a 27-year-old waitress at the restaurant. She wore a clean white shirt, a fitted black apron, tailored black slacks, and polished shoes. She moved between tables with patience and professionalism, making sure every guest received excellent service. To most people in the room, she was simply part of the background. They saw the uniform before they saw the person. They saw the job before they saw the potential. What they did not know was that Maya had spent years studying mathematics. Before life changed her plans, she had been one of the strongest students in her university mathematics program. She had a rare ability to recognize numerical patterns quickly and solve complicated problems through a combination of memory, logic, and deep understanding. But after taking on family responsibilities, she chose a different path for a while. She worked, supported the people she loved, and continued learning whenever she had the chance. She never stopped believing that knowledge was valuable, even if nobody else knew about it. Later in the evening, the conversation at Alexander's table turned toward mathematical models used in business decisions. One investor mentioned how difficult it was to predict market changes. Alexander smiled and began explaining how experience and analytical thinking separated great leaders from everyone else. As Maya placed a glass of water on the table, she quietly noticed a calculation written on a document nearby. She did not interrupt. She simply continued working. But one of the guests noticed her glance and jokingly asked, "You look like you have an opinion. Do you solve these kinds of problems too?" The table laughed lightly. It was not meant to be cruel. It was simply the kind of assumption people made without thinking. Maya smiled politely. "I enjoy mathematics," she answered. Alexander looked curious. "Really? How much do you enjoy it?" The question carried a playful challenge. Maya did not take offense. "Enough to spend a lot of time with it." The guest smiled. Alexander leaned back in his chair. "Then perhaps you can help us settle something." He looked at the people around the table before turning back to Maya. "I will give you a challenge. If you can solve a difficult mathematical problem before our analysts can explain the solution, I will give you $1 million. The room became quiet. Some guests looked surprised. Others looked entertained. They saw a successful CEO offering an impossible challenge to a waitress. Alexander believed he was creating an interesting moment for the evening. He did not know he had just given the person standing beside the table a chance to reveal something nobody expected. And Maya Robinson simply looked at the numbers in front of her, calm and focused, because she already knew the room was about to change. The room became completely quiet after Alexander Bennett announced the $1 million challenge. Just moments earlier, the conversation had been about global markets, business strategies, and the future of technology. Now, every person at the table was looking at Maya Robinson, the waitress standing beside them with a calm expression and a simple serving tray in her hands. Some guests smiled because they believed they were witnessing a harmless moment of entertainment. They saw a billionaire CEO challenging a restaurant employee and assumed they already knew how the story would end. Alexander watched Maya carefully. He expected hesitation. He expected surprise. Perhaps he even expected her to politely decline. But Maya did not react the way anyone imagined. She looked at the mathematical problem placed in front of her and studied it quietly. There was no nervous movement, no attempt to impress the room, just focus. The numbers on the page represented a complex calculation involving multiple variables. It was the type of problem that required patience, logic, and a deep understanding of mathematical relationships. Alexander had chosen it because he believed it would separate confidence from actual ability. His own team of analysts had spent significant time studying similar problems. He believed it was a fair challenge. One of the investors smiled and said, "Take your time. Nobody expects this to be simple." Maya nodded politely. "Thank you." Then she began. At first, nobody understood what she was doing. She was not writing long explanations or making complicated notes. She was looking at the numbers and identifying patterns. Her eyes moved carefully across the page as she connected different parts of the problem in her mind. Several guests exchanged curious looks. They expected a guess, but they were seeing something else. They were seeing someone think. After a few moments, Maya gently placed the paper back on the table. "The answer is this," she said calmly. The room waited. Alexander looked at the number and then looked back at her. For a second, there was silence. He checked the calculation again. Then he looked toward one of his business analysts, who confirmed the result. Maya was correct. The guests reacted with surprise, but Alexander remained composed. He was impressed, yet he was still trying to understand what had happened. "That was faster than I expected," he said. Maya smiled slightly. The numbers were already showing the pattern. "I just followed it." That answer caught his attention. She was not describing luck. She was describing a way of thinking. One of the guests asked her how she solved the problem so quickly. Maya explained that mathematics was not only about memorizing formulas. It was about recognizing relationships between information and understanding why those relationships existed. The explanation was simple, but it revealed years of experience. Alexander leaned forward. The challenge had changed. It was no longer about whether Maya could solve one problem. It was about understanding who she really was. "Where did you learn to think this way?" he asked. Maya looked down briefly, then answered honestly. "I have always loved mathematics. I spent years studying it." The room became more attentive. The woman they had seen carrying plates was now explaining concepts that many educated professionals struggled with. Yet Maya remained humble. She did not speak as if she had defeated anyone. She spoke like someone sharing something she loved. Alexander looked around the table and noticed the change in everyone's expressions. The same people who had smiled moments earlier were now listening carefully. The challenge he created as a simple test had become something completely different. It had become a reminder that ability does not always arrive with a title, a position, or a place at the head of the table. Sometimes it stands quietly nearby, waiting for someone to ask the right question. The silence after Maya Robinson solved the first challenge felt different from the silence before it. Before, the room had been filled with confidence, assumptions, and quiet amusement. Now every person at the table was paying attention. The woman they had barely noticed moments earlier had changed the entire atmosphere without raising her voice or seeking recognition. She had simply allowed her ability to speak for itself. Alexander Bennett looked at the paper in front of him one more time. The answer was undeniable. Maya had solved a problem that many experienced professionals would have needed more time to analyze. Yet what surprised him most was not the speed of her calculation. It was the way she approached the problem. She did not rush. She did not try to impress anyone. She saw something in the numbers that others had overlooked. Alexander had spent his entire career searching for people who could identify opportunities hidden beneath the surface. He had built companies around that idea. But now, sitting across from a waitress in a restaurant, he realized he had failed to apply that same principle to the people around him. "That was impressive," Alexander finally said. "But I am curious. Was that just a special case? Or is mathematics really something you have studied deeply?" Maya looked at him calmly. "I have studied it for many years." Her answer was simple, but the room became even more interested. One of the investors asked, "What kind of mathematics?" Maya explained that she had always been fascinated by patterns, structures, and the way numbers could reveal information that was not immediately obvious. She described how mathematics was not only about solving equations. It was about understanding systems, finding connections, and asking better questions. The guests listened carefully because her explanation showed something beyond technical skill. It showed a different way of thinking. Alexander decided to continue the challenge, not because he wanted to embarrass her, but because he genuinely wanted to understand the level of her ability. "Let me ask you something more difficult," he said. He presented another problem, this time involving a complex series of calculations related to financial planning. Several people at the table recognized that it was not a simple exercise. It required understanding relationships between numbers and predicting possible outcomes. Maya studied the problem quietly. The restaurant remained still. Even the guests at nearby tables seemed to notice the unusual moment happening at the VIP area. After a short time, Maya began explaining her approach. She did not simply provide an answer. She explained why the numbers behaved the way they did. She described the possible outcomes and the assumptions behind each calculation. The explanation surprised everyone because she was not just performing a trick. She was demonstrating understanding. One of Alexander's business partners, a financial expert with years of experience, looked impressed. "That is not memorization," he said. "That is analysis." Maya nodded. "Exactly. Numbers tell stories. You just have to know how to read them." Those words stayed with Alexander. Numbers told stories. It was a concept he understood deeply in business, but he had never expected to hear it from someone he had originally seen as a restaurant employee. He looked at Maya's apron, then at the calculations in front of him, and recognized the contrast. The person wearing the simplest clothing at the table had brought the most complex ideas into the conversation. A few guests who had previously smiled now sat quietly. Their opinions had changed because the evidence was impossible to ignore. Maya had not demanded respect. She had earned it naturally. As the evening continued, Alexander found himself asking fewer questions as a challenge and more questions out of genuine curiosity. For the first time that night, he was not trying to test someone. He was trying to learn from them. And Maya Robinson, the waitress everyone underestimated, had just shown an entire room that intelligence does not need permission to exist. The evening at Grand Harbor Restaurant had started as a celebration of success, but now it had become something Alexander Bennett never expected. He arrived believing he understood intelligence, confidence, and achievement. He left that table realizing that talent could exist in places he had never thought to look. Yet the biggest surprise was not that Maya Robinson could solve difficult mathematical problems. The biggest surprise was that she had carried that ability quietly for years without anyone knowing. After the second challenge, the atmosphere around the table changed completely. The investors who had once focused only on Alexander were now asking Maya questions. They wanted to understand her background, her education, and how someone with such a remarkable ability had ended up working as a waitress. Maya answered with the same calm attitude she had shown all evening. She never spoke as if she was trying to prove that she was better than anyone else. She simply shared her story. "I have always loved mathematics," she explained. "For me, numbers are not just answers. They are ideas connected together." Alexander listened carefully. He noticed something unusual about her. Many talented people he had met throughout his career wanted recognition. They wanted others to know how smart they were. Maya was different. Her confidence came from understanding, not attention. She did not need the room to be impressed. She was already comfortable with who she was. One of the investors asked Maya why she never pursued a bigger opportunity in the mathematics field. For a moment, her expression became thoughtful. She explained that life had changed her plans. After college, she had faced responsibilities that required her to make difficult choices. Continuing her studies was no longer as simple as it once seemed. She chose to work, support her family, and continue learning whenever she could. "Sometimes people think success only happens in one straight line," Maya said. "But everyone has a different journey." Those words stayed with Alexander. He had built his entire career around recognizing potential. His company searched for talented engineers, creative thinkers, and ambitious professionals. Yet he suddenly realized that his definition of potential had been too narrow. He had been searching for brilliance in conference rooms and universities while overlooking the possibility that it could be standing anywhere. The conversation continued, and Alexander asked Maya one final question. "If you knew you had this ability, why did you never tell anyone?" Maya looked around the restaurant before answering, "Because being good at something does not mean you need everyone to know immediately. I enjoy learning. That is enough." Her response created a moment of reflection. Alexander had spent years measuring success through numbers, revenue, growth, market value, company performance. But Maya reminded him that some of the most meaningful qualities could not be placed on a financial report. Patience, curiosity, discipline, humility. As the dinner came to an end, Alexander watched Maya return to her responsibilities. She picked up her serving tray and continued helping other guests, exactly as she had done before the challenge began. Nothing about her behavior changed because people finally noticed her. The only thing that changed was the way others saw her. One of the investors approached Alexander afterward and said, "You realize she was probably the most interesting person at this table all night." Alexander smiled because he knew it was true. The person he had invited into a challenge had actually challenged him. Not with money, not with competition, but with a completely different understanding of what greatness looked like. And as he looked across the restaurant at Maya quietly continuing her work, Alexander began wondering how many other talented people had been overlooked simply because nobody had taken the time to ask the right question. The next morning, Alexander Bennett found himself thinking about one question that had followed him since the dinner at Grand Harbor Restaurant. How many extraordinary people had he walked past without ever noticing? For years, Alexander had built his company by finding talent. He believed he understood what ambition looked like. He searched for the strongest resumes, the most impressive backgrounds, and the people who already had proof of success. But Maya Robinson had challenged that belief without trying to challenge him at all. She had shown him that talent did not always arrive with a title, a corner office, or a professional introduction. Sometimes it arrived quietly, wearing a simple uniform and carrying a serving tray. Back at Bennett Financial Technologies, Alexander sat in his office overlooking downtown Chicago. The city moved below him, filled with millions of people following their own stories. He opened the notes from the dinner and looked again at Maya's explanations. What impressed him most was not just her ability to solve difficult problems. It was the way she thought. She looked beyond numbers and searched for meaning behind them. That was the same quality Alexander valued in the greatest leaders he knew. Curiosity, vision, the ability to see what others missed. Later that week, Alexander returned to Grand Harbor Restaurant. This time, he did not arrive with investors or a business meeting. He came with questions. When Maya approached his table, she looked surprised to see him again. "I hope everything was good the other night," she said politely. Alexander smiled. "Everything was more than good. I actually came back because I wanted to learn more about your story." Maya paused for a moment. She was not used to someone asking about her journey. Most people asked for service. They asked for recommendations. They rarely asked about the person standing in front of them. Alexander asked about her education, her interests, and the years she spent studying mathematics. Maya explained that she had once dreamed of becoming a researcher. She loved discovering patterns and solving problems that seemed impossible at first. But when her family needed support, she made a choice. She stepped away from that path and focused on the responsibilities in front of her. "I never stopped learning," she said. "Even when my circumstances changed, my curiosity stayed the same." Alexander listened quietly. The words stayed with him because they reflected something he had forgotten. He had always believed successful people were defined by what they achieved publicly. Maya reminded him that many people were building themselves privately long before the world noticed. A few days later, Alexander reviewed a new idea with his leadership team. He proposed creating a program designed to discover overlooked talent from unexpected backgrounds. Some executives were uncertain. They asked if it was practical. They wondered if someone without a traditional career path could truly contribute. At a high level, Alexander looked around the room and remembered the restaurant. "The problem is not that talented people do not exist," he said. "The problem is that we do not always know where to look for them." His team noticed something different in his voice. This was not just another business strategy. It was personal. Alexander was no longer talking about numbers alone. He was talking about people. Meanwhile, Maya continued working at the restaurant. She had no idea that one conversation had already started changing the way a billionaire CEO viewed success. She did not seek recognition. She did not expect an opportunity. She simply continued doing what she had always done, learning, improving, and treating every person with respect. But sometimes the biggest changes begin when someone finally notices what was there all along. Alexander had entered the restaurant thinking he was offering a challenge. In reality, Maya had given him a lesson that no amount of money could purchase. And the more he thought about it, the more he understood that the greatest opportunities were often hidden behind the people everyone else ignored. The week after the dinner at Grand Harbor Restaurant, Alexander Bennett began seeing his own company differently. The walls of his office were still filled with awards, achievements, and reminders of the billions of dollars his company had created, but his thoughts kept returning to one person who had never asked for attention. Maya Robinson had changed the way he looked at talent, not because she wanted to prove him wrong, but because she reminded him of something he had forgotten. Great ability does not always announce itself. Sometimes it waits quietly for someone to notice. Alexander decided to take a closer look at the idea he had mentioned to his leadership team. He wanted to create a new initiative focused on discovering talented people from unexpected backgrounds. But before making any announcement, he wanted to understand the challenges those people faced. So he returned to the place where the idea began. When he walked into Grand Harbor Restaurant again, Maya greeted him with the same professionalism as before. She did not treat him differently because he was a billionaire CEO. She treated him like any other guest. That small detail stayed with Alexander. Many people changed their behavior around power. Maya did not. "I have been thinking about something you said," Alexander told her. "You said numbers tell stories. I think people do too." Maya smiled. "People are usually more complicated than numbers." Alexander laughed softly because he knew she was right. During their conversation, he asked Maya about her future. He expected her to talk about a dream she had abandoned, but her answer surprised him. She said she still loved mathematics, but she also believed every experience taught something valuable. Working at the restaurant had taught her patience, communication, and how to understand different kinds of people. "Learning does not only happen in classrooms," Maya explained. "Sometimes it happens when you are paying attention to the world around you." Those words stayed with Alexander long after he left the restaurant. At Bennett Financial Technologies, he presented his new idea to his executive team. He wanted the company to search for hidden talent beyond traditional hiring methods. He wanted opportunities to reach people who had skills but lacked the right connections. Some executives supported the idea immediately. Others questioned whether it would produce meaningful results. They believed the safest approach was continuing to recruit from familiar places. Alexander listened carefully. Years earlier, he might have agreed with them. But now he remembered the woman who had solved complex problems while wearing a waitress uniform. "If we only search in the places where we expect talent to exist," he said, "we will continue missing the people who surprise us." The room became quiet. His team recognized that this was not simply a business decision. It was a change in perspective. Meanwhile, Maya continued her normal routine. She arrived at work, served customers, and spent her free time studying mathematics. She had no idea that Alexander was building something inspired by their conversation. She did not know that her quiet confidence had influenced a company leader. She simply continued being herself. Several weeks later, Alexander invited Maya to visit the company headquarters. When she entered the modern building, she looked around with curiosity. It was a completely different environment from the restaurant where they first met. But Alexander wanted her to understand why he had invited her. "I do not want to offer you an opportunity because I feel sorry for you," he said. "I want to offer you an opportunity because I recognize your ability." Maya looked at him carefully. For the first time, she saw that Alexander was not trying to challenge her anymore. He was trying to learn from her. The billionaire CEO who once believed he could identify talent instantly had discovered something much more valuable. Sometimes the greatest minds are not hidden because they lack ability. They are hidden because nobody takes the time to look. When Maya Robinson walked into Bennett Financial Technologies for the first time, she expected to see a successful company. What she did not expect was to see how many people inside the building were also searching for answers, ideas, and new ways to improve. The glass walls, modern offices, and busy teams represented a world very different from the restaurant where she had spent years working. But Alexander Bennett wanted her to understand something important. He did not invite her there because of a single mathematical challenge. He invited her because he saw a way of thinking that could help others. During the visit, Alexander introduced Maya to several members of his leadership team. Some were immediately impressed by her story. Others were curious but uncertain. They had spent their careers following traditional paths. They understood degrees, job titles, and professional achievements. Maya represented something different. She represented potential that had not followed a predictable route. One executive asked Maya about her experience solving complex problems without access to advanced tools or research facilities. Maya smiled and answered honestly. Tools can help you solve a problem, but understanding helps you find the right problem to solve. The answer made the room quiet for a moment. Alexander noticed the reaction because he understood the meaning behind her words. Many companies focused on finding people who already had achievements they could measure. Maya was reminding them to also look for people who had the ability to create those achievements in the future. Over the next few weeks, Alexander worked with his team to develop a new talent discovery program. The goal was simple: find intelligent, motivated people who might have been overlooked because their backgrounds did not match traditional expectations. The program reached out to community groups, educational organizations, and individuals who had developed valuable skills through different experiences. Alexander knew some people would question the idea. They did. Some investors wondered why the company was changing a process that had already brought success. But Alexander had changed. He no longer saw the program as a risk. He saw it as an opportunity. One afternoon, he invited Maya to speak with a group of employees. She stood in front of engineers, analysts, and managers who had spent years building impressive careers. She did not speak about being underestimated. She did not criticize anyone who had misunderstood her. Instead, she talked about curiosity. She talked about the importance of continuing to learn even when nobody is watching. Your current position does not decide your future, Maya told them. What matters is what you continue building inside yourself. The employees listened carefully because her message was not about mathematics alone. It was about resilience and growth. After the presentation, one young employee approached Alexander and said, "I think we spend too much time looking for perfect candidates instead of developing people with potential." Alexander smiled because that was exactly the lesson Maya had taught him. Later that evening, Alexander visited Grand Harbor Restaurant again. He saw Maya working just as she always had. She greeted customers, helped her co-workers, and carried herself with the same humility she had shown from the beginning. The world around her was beginning to recognize her ability, but she had never needed recognition to keep improving. Alexander realized something that changed his understanding of leadership. Great leaders did not simply discover talent. They created environments where talent could finally be seen. And Maya Robinson, the waitress he once challenged without knowing her true ability, had become the person who helped him understand what leadership was really supposed to be. Months after Maya Robinson first walked into Bennett Financial Technologies, the changes inside the company had become impossible to ignore. The building looked the same from the outside, but the way people thought inside had started to shift. Alexander Bennett had spent years creating a company known for efficiency, innovation, and financial success. Now he wanted it to become known for something else, recognizing people before the world recognized them. The talent discovery program that began with one conversation at a restaurant had grown into a serious initiative. Employees started sharing stories about people they knew who had incredible skills but never had the right opportunity to show them. Some were self-taught experts. Some were creative problem solvers. Some had valuable knowledge developed through life experiences rather than traditional careers. Alexander listened to these stories differently now. Before meeting Maya, he might have focused only on qualifications written on paper. Now he understood that a resume could show where someone had been, but it could not always show where someone could go. Maya became an important part of the program, not because she was treated as a symbol, but because her perspective was valuable. She helped the team understand how to identify curiosity, discipline, and the ability to think differently. During one meeting, an executive asked her what separated talented people from everyone else. Maya thought for a moment before answering. "I think talented people are not always the ones who know the most. They are often the ones who keep asking better questions." Alexander remembered those words because they reflected the lesson he had learned himself. The greatest discoveries often started with a question someone else ignored. Over time, Maya began working with different teams inside the company. She analyzed problems, shared ideas, and helped employees approach challenges from new perspectives. She was still the same person who once carried a serving tray through a busy restaurant. The difference was that more people finally had the chance to see what had always been there. One afternoon, Alexander invited Maya to join him at a company event celebrating employees who had contributed innovative ideas. Before the event began, He thanked her privately. "You changed the way I lead," he said. Maya smiled. "I only answered a few questions." Alexander shook his head. "No, you changed the questions I asked." That moment represented how much both of them had changed. Alexander was no longer the CEO who believed success came only from finding people who already looked successful. He had become a leader who searched for possibility. Maya was no longer someone whose abilities were hidden from the world. She was someone helping others discover their own potential. At the event, Alexander spoke to hundreds of employees. He did not talk about money or company growth. He talked about awareness. He talked about the importance of seeing people beyond their current roles. "The most valuable talent is not always standing in the most visible place," he said. "Sometimes it is waiting for someone to notice." Maya listened from the audience, quietly proud but still humble. She never wanted the world to focus only on her story. She wanted people to understand the larger message behind it. Every person carried something valuable. Every person had a story that others might never see. And sometimes, one unexpected conversation was enough to reveal what had been hidden all along. Years after the night at Grand Harbor Restaurant, Alexander Bennett still remembered the simple question that changed everything. How many talented people had he overlooked because he was only searching in familiar places? The answer became the foundation of a completely different way of leading his company. Bennett Financial Technologies continued to grow, but its greatest achievement was no longer measured only by revenue or market success. It was measured by the people who were finally given a chance to show what they could do. The Talent Discovery Program expanded across different communities, finding individuals with unique skills, creative thinking, and determination. Many of them had stories similar to Maya Robinson. They had abilities that were never recognized because their circumstances did not match traditional expectations. Alexander often told his leadership team that the purpose of the program was not to find hidden talent for the sake of improving a company. It was about understanding that people deserve to be seen for their potential, not judged only by their current position. Maya continued to influence the company in ways nobody expected. She became known not only for her mathematical ability, but also for her way of thinking. She reminded people that intelligence was not just about finding answers. It was about understanding problems, asking better questions, and seeing possibilities where others saw limitations. One afternoon, Alexander visited Grand Harbor Restaurant again. He sat at the same table where everything had started years before. The restaurant looked almost the same. The lights were warm, the conversations filled the room, and guests continued creating their own stories. For a moment, he remembered the night when he believed he was the person offering an opportunity. Now he understood that Maya had given him something far more valuable. She had given him a new perspective. When Maya approached the table, she smiled. She was still humble, still thoughtful, and still the same person who had quietly solved a difficult problem while others underestimated her. Alexander thanked her for the impact she had made. Maya looked surprised. "I never expected any of this," she said. Alexander nodded. "That is exactly why it mattered. You were never trying to prove anything. You were simply being yourself." Their conversation reflected how much both of them had changed. Alexander had learned that leadership was not about always having the right answers. It was about being willing to learn from unexpected sources. Maya had learned that even the quietest talents could inspire change when given the opportunity to be seen. The world often celebrates people after they become successful, but Maya's story showed that success often begins long before recognition arrives. It begins with dedication, patience, and the courage to keep developing a gift even when nobody is watching. As Alexander looked around the restaurant, he thought about the millions of people carrying abilities that remained undiscovered. He knew there were countless stories waiting for someone to notice them. The greatest lesson was never about a challenge, a number, or a business deal. It was about human potential. A person's value could not be measured by their job title, their clothing, or the assumptions others made about them. Sometimes the person standing quietly in the background is the person who can change the way everyone sees the world. And Alexander Bennett, a billionaire who once believed he understood success, discovered that the most valuable thing he could gain was not another achievement. It was the wisdom to recognize greatness when it appeared in the most unexpected place.